All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. I know that we have folks that are joining us from all over the place, which is awesome. And I love seeing all the different locations that get to join us since we don't get to meet in person, which allows us to be able to meet with folks all over the world. So I love it. So I am Alana Davis. I'm your host and meetup organizer. I work with e-commerce shops to remove friction from the buying process. My focus is really around the user experience, and I rescue Shopify websites, making them more effective in attracting more visitors, providing better SEO, and increasing conversion rates at a fraction of the cost of a full redesign. Let's take a quick look at our agenda today. We do have just a short 1 hour window. Typically, these are a little bit longer, so I don't want to spend a ton of time with the housekeeping items, if you will. This webinar is being recorded, so assuming that everything works, I will be able to share the video hopefully today, maybe tomorrow, but let's go ahead and start to jump in. First of all, a quick shout out for our sponsors. Shopify is more than just an e-commerce solution. You can sell anywhere to anyone with Shopify's e-commerce platform and point of sale features. And then Eric Davis of Little Stream Software, the maker of JSON-LD for SEO, helps your Shopify store win, which results in Google search, getting you more organic traffic that converts better, all without having to fight for better rankings or paying constantly for ads. I'm going to post a couple links in the chat for you in case that is helpful and you want to learn more about them. Here's a couple of upcoming events that are happening. So be on the lookout for an email later this week or early next for our April session with Ann Thomas. She's going to talk with us about the risk and rewards of custom Shopify development work, which will be really exciting. I've also had folks over various chats ask me to do live store reviews. And I actually have an event that's happening on Thursday with Shopify Compass. So if you have not registered for that, I'll put that in the chat for you as well. But feel free to join us. We will be taking live submissions on the spot. So if you want your store to be reviewed, I encourage you to join us as early as possible. I do hope to have an event with this meetup at some point in the near future too, but I have a couple of other speakers that are already lined up. So feel free to join me on Thursday as I do a couple of live store reviews. And then I also have a Facebook group. So if you are local to Portland and want to join us, or if you are a Shopify store that would like to be able to network with other people, please do join us as well. If you have any upcoming topics that you would like us to talk about or areas you want us to explore, let me know in the feedback requests that you're going to be receiving. It really helps me to make sure that I know that we're providing a topic that is not only of interest to you, but then also the feedback that I get helps me to know what's working well or not, and then we can continue to provide that resource for you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Josh is the founder and head of optimization at Test Triggers. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, Alana. It's a pleasure to be on here. I'm going to throw this on. Oops, sorry, I didn't realize I couldn't do video. Okay, so let's stick to the screen share then. So Josh Frank from Test Triggers. So Test Triggers is a conversion optimization agency. So as I get this playing for everyone, we work with e-commerce brands to improve their conversion rates, largely through A/B testing. So today we're going to talk about product pages and specifically how to improve your product page, how to get more conversions, and how we at Test Triggers use something we came up with called the script method to fix those product pages. So first off, the idea of what really is the job of a product page. Largely, we don't need to get too complicated here. The job of a product page is to get someone to add to cart. Now, there are different realms of that, one of which, if there's someone that comes to your page that's ready to buy, let's just get out of their way and let them add to cart. Now, for someone that needs to look at information, perhaps they have some reservations, let's help them get those answers and add to cart. Now, here's something that people often don't think about, but it's also important. For people that our product just isn't right for, let's quickly get them off the page because they don't need this product, they don't want this product. But the better we not only qualify, but um, get rid of traffic that isn't necessary to this page, the better. So like I said, I'm going to talk about the script methods. So we'll go over what each of these mean, and then we'll look at an e-commerce example of a store that maybe does a great job or does a poor job. Script simply stands for story, clarity, reviews, images, parts and pieces, and terms. So first off with story. Now, I'm not specifically talking here about a story like a hero's journey or something that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, but really just how does your product improve your customer's life? And so many stores forget that your product is intended in some way or another to make your customer's life better. So looking at SNOO, now this product page from SNOO, their Smart Sleeper, is a masterpiece of a product page. So I highly recommend after this, this is a good page to peruse for all sorts of great things that they do. Chief of which is how they talk about the outcomes and the story of before and after having a SNOO. Their tagline here is, when baby sleeps, everyone sleeps. And I think that just in that sentence, we can see how good SNOO is at what they do. Again, the goal outcome is that the baby sleeps once you get this, but there's also the goal, which is that the customer, the parent, sleeps. So they do such a great job of storytelling there. I'm going to focus on another part of their page here. They have this icon section that many stores have, but what they've done is they've clearly gone through this copy many, many, many times to ensure several things. One, everything you see is benefit-based. All of these headings, added sleep, added safety, calms fussing, they've narrowed everything down to the clearest beneficial outcome for someone purchasing the SNOO. You'll also notice there's no condescension or guilt. And these, if anyone's, a parent here, knows that those are not things you want to hear. It's like nails on a chalkboard, right? So there are so many ideas around sleep and what you should and shouldn't do. And they've just removed all of that, that potentially harmful and condescending copy and just gotten rid of it. And the last thing is there's no overly technical talk and no boasting about we type of talk. Everything is, again, focused on the outcome of the potential customer. Next up, we're going to talk about clarity. So clarity sort of goes along with what we were talking about before in story, in the sense that it tends to be copy related. But clarity really boils down to, how would you explain your product to a close friend? So I always tell anyone we're working with that struggles with copy to sit down and write a letter or an email to a friend explaining your product. You wouldn't use really bombastic terms. You wouldn't use overly technical terms. And you would tend to write somewhere between an 8th and 10th grade reading level. And that's what we recommend on the web for several reasons. One, simply because it's a good level of comprehension for everyone, but also people that are scanning and reading quickly, they aren't, those big words don't impress like you think. They just tend to confuse. So we're going to pick on a brand just a little bit. EVELO electric bikes, for the uncompromised rider looking for the best. Now, if I look at this description here, I'm gonna give it a go here. For the uncompromising rider looking for the best, with the limited edition, get a unique step-through frame, Involio transmission, fully automatic, harmony shifting system, I can't even get through a sentence. I don't think I've gotten one full sentence without realizing I don't know what any of these things mean. I have no idea how they benefit me. I just know that it's really, really technical. So again, going through this, we just haven't gotten to any benefits. So looking at something like a powerful 750 watt motor, again, that just doesn't mean anything to me, but perhaps saying something like a safe speed of up to 18 miles an hour, right? Maybe that's what benefit you get from a 750 watt motor. I don't know. Um, Saying something like fully automatic harmony shifting system, I imagine that means I don't have to shift myself, but putting that in terms that are benefits based would be saying something like no need to shift while riding up or down a hill, right? So something like that. We also look at this the boasting nature of this, only for those looking for the best. Very, very few brands can get away with that. So I really suggest being more endearing and speaking less of yourself, and again, more outcome based. Also, this last line arrives nearly fully assembled. Now, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with saying that. I would just bet from a lot of user tests that I've done that will trip people up in the sense of immediately thinking of, well, what doesn't come assembled? What work do I have to do? So again, we can simply change it to something like assembles in less than 25 minutes, assembles with fewer than 2 tools. Again, some improvements to be made on this page for sure. Next would be reviews. Almost all stores collect reviews. They have a review section of their page, but most just simply don't do enough with them. So here's a product page from Boom by Cindy Joseph, Boom Cosmetics. What they've actually done is taken where the page title would go, the product title, and just made it a review. Now, I'm not saying that every store should do this, but most stores, they simply don't feature these reviews enough. And this technique works especially great if you only have 4 or 5 reviews, right? You can pull a couple that you really like and bring them higher up the page. Now, a great review includes some sort of initial doubt and some way that doubt has been overcome. So saying something like, I was afraid that this product would be X, but actually it's the perfect Y that I need. Those types of sentences really, really help. The next part I'm going to talk about is images. So I believe images to be the most underutilized section of your page. Many brands have already, for a long time have said you need quality images and you need a lot of them. And yes, that's true. But what we end up with sometimes is 40 images of a product at very, very slightly different angles. And that really doesn't help anyone understand more about the product. So let's look at tactical baby gear. So they sell diaper bags and other baby gear, all marketed towards like a macho guy, right? But something they've done here is one, they've used annotated images, meaning they've added an arrow and a little line of text to help you understand products. This is so beneficial, particularly for complex products. I think back to the electric bike that we used that really could have used something like that in their image gallery. But using these annotated images really helps to show the precise benefits and features. Now, also, you'll notice these images almost tell a story themselves. It shows you how you would wear it, how you would get the changing mat out. Your diapers would be inside. There's a wipe section, on the side of it. So again, you're not just showing the images, you're showing the features and the benefits of the product. Again, we talked about showing 43 pictures of a product at slightly different angles. That's not going to help you. Another little trick that I don't even think I mentioned here is going back to the reviews section. You can take the lower third or lower quarter of your product images and just overlay a product review on there. Again, if somebody's in this image gallery and they're going through it, let's do the most we possibly can to sell them on outcomes and features and benefits, and also toss a review in there. Last is what we call parts and pieces. So this is as simple as it sounds. What exactly is going to be in this box when I open it up? Let's look at an example from CRUTCHFIELD, another just world-class site to go through. We're looking at a drone here. Now, a drone has so many pieces, parts, and components with it. So CRUTCHFIELD includes this what's in the box section, letting you know, again, am I going to need to buy anything else just to get this thing up and running? Letting people know, are there little extras, little perks that come with this product? This really, really helps people to understand, again, What exactly am I getting? Do I need to buy anything else? And then the last section is terms. So terms meaning return policy, shipping, what we also refer to as answering the what if questions. So this is Callaway's a golf brand. And there are tons of questions, right, when you're buying this about what happens if it breaks, what if I don't like it? And they go through this section here, 12-month warranty, free head cover, 90-day buyback policy, certificate of authenticity. So they're marking all these little questions you might have in your brain. Again, what if it breaks? What if I don't like it? What if it's fake? They've addressed all of those here. I find that this, again, if we want to talk about underutilized sections, I was a little surprised at how hard I found it to go find great examples of this, which tells me that just not enough stores are doing this. So one thing we want to keep in note as we spec out our kind of terms objection busters here is avoid phrases like satisfaction guaranteed, because people have just heard them a million times and they've been so overused they just don't mean anything. So let's try to be, again, clear about what we're saying people can actually achieve from this. Okay, so that was the script method. I've got here my Twitter handle and also my email. Please don't hesitate to reach me on either platforms. We're going to go through a Q&A I know here, but if something comes up or you'd like me to take a look at your site, do a product page review or something like that, please reach out to me on Twitter or email. And now we can go to questions if anyone has them.
Yeah, really quickly, someone just asked in the chat, "What is T?" It wasn't clear. Can you go back since it's right there and talk more?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, T is terms. Yeah, T is terms, which we always refer to that as the what if questions.
And since we're talking about that, I had written down a quick note on it. Oftentimes when I see the references to terms, just like you showed in that Callaway example, they're usually icons of sorts that link out to another space. Do you typically recommend that they get linked out to a policy page, or do you prefer people that write more paragraph style within the product page?
You're always going to want to link to something just so that you can also say you're linking to the full policy, right? Because every policy is hard to summarize. The more you can get as far as kind of a name for the policy and maybe a one-liner on how it works, that's great. But whether you're linking to a light box that explains it or opening the terms page in a new window, something like that, I would suggest that it is clickable to something.
Perfect. And there's a couple questions that are in here. So as I start reading them off, if you have other questions, please put them either in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we will definitely get to them as quickly as we can. So someone asked, how do you talk about benefits if it's a regulated industry?
So obviously you're up against a bit of a constraint there, without knowing, again, like the industry and the regulations. It's a little tough to tell. But if you can feature reviews, then you can kind of allow those that review the product to sort of sell the benefits on their own. I mean, most anytime I'm working with a brand, we are doing deep customer research, review mining, in order to even find what the benefits are. And I would suggest that a lot of you kind of look at what you believe the benefits of your product to be versus what are customers actually saying that they are, and can we bring those things back onto the page? So if you're able to use user-generated content or customer stated benefits, maybe that's a way around it. But again, without knowing kind of the industry, the regulations, it's a little hard to tell how to squeeze those benefits out.
Yeah, and just to echo that too, I agree. It's challenging without knowing exactly what it is, but I love using user reviews as a way to help sell for you. And so if they're saying something that you're then able to share, but you're not able to declare yourself, sometimes that's a way around it. Again, it depends on what it is that you're talking about. But that's one thing I love about using the user generated content, is that it's someone else is saying it for you, and so you
And I
don't
would
have to worry
say
about it.
one quick thing to add to that is, like, let's say in the case of it's a supplement that you can't, per the FDA, say it increases this or that. Try to just get right out in front of that. You know what I mean? Just if you boldly say, hey, we're not allowed to say this, and that, or it hasn't been proven to do this, but here's what our customers have said about it, how it helps them. So the more you just get out in front of things like that and be transparent, um, one, it's a pattern interrupt because people are so used to seeing everyone just talk so, everything's great, glowing about everything, satisfaction guaranteed, that it's a pattern interrupt and people will not expect it. And then again, transparency, especially, this day and age is pretty vital and actually a pretty darn good benefit.
Yeah, and it looks like you hit it on the head. It was regarding supplements. So I do love what you said too, though, about being upfront and honest about stuff, trying not to hide behind what you can and can't say. It's like, we're not allowed to say this. Like, just
Yeah.
be open that you can't say it, and then people will either ask you questions or they're going to have to figure it out in different
And
ways.
and also like that shows that the industry is saying something like,
Yeah.
hey, there aren't enough studies that prove or disprove this right now because the science is a little bit behind this. It's new and whatever else. And like just again, that's where you could also leverage a blog and articles and things just to just openly talk about like these are our struggles, with trying to whatever prove out benefits or whatever else.
Yeah. Again, if you have questions, please do feel free to ask either in the Q&A or in the chat. Another question, with regards to the images and how you use the text to annotate them, I often see this too, where people will put a whole bunch of text in there and then it becomes almost too much to read through. So
Hmm.
what's that fine line between how much text you're actually going to include in an image and whether that's on a product page of like a small image versus like a large sales page or on social media, and how do you work with all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say one is we just want to limit the annotations to like 3 per image, but you could also, if you had more, again, you have, I'd prefer someone add more images and keep the text more brief. Um, but again, the biggest thing is that you are, and I know I feel like I've said this 10,000 times, but you're leading with the benefit. So again, we'll go back to picking on the e-bike for just a minute. Um, but instead of pointing to the motor and saying 750-watt motor, you say speeds of up to 18 miles an hour. Instead of pointing to the battery and saying how many, you know, um, I don't think watts is a measurement for battery, but whatever it is, saying what the charge time is, like how long it holds a charge. So those types of things. But yeah, trying to again give it one little benefit, point to it, and if you need more, use more images as opposed to just adding more annotations.
And then since you sort of talked about the bike example again, I think you mentioned in there using a 8th to 10th grade reading level. What tool
Hmm.
do you use or do you recommend for folks? Because I think sometimes it's really hard for them to know what that reading level actually is.
Yeah, fantastic question. So there are tools like Grammarly or Hemingway where you can just take your text, um, paste it in, and it will spit you out. Okay, here's the reading level of this, um, and they'll give you all sorts of great, great information. But it will give you the reading level, so you can. And it'll usually point to which words are potentially, at a secondary or collegiate reading level, and you can find other ways to talk about that. Uh, it gets a little harder again if you are, let's say, in the supplement business where there's a lot of science talk happening, but your customers are a touch different. And again, it's not just about readability from people's ability to comprehend. It's more about the speed with which people navigate a website. That going anything beyond eighth, ninth grade tends to lose its value.
And then along the same lines, do you recommend breaking up paragraphs or more of like a long form paragraph?
I am always a fan of shorter paragraphs. Um, Shorter paragraphs, bullet lists are great. But with that being said, you know, if your writing style means that you have more text, more copy, but you're doing it again in a way that's engaging and telling a story and being, you know, um, being unique with the way you talk about your product. Don't worry about like too much text. People that say, "Well, no one reads, so make everything as brief as possible." People, this has been proved out in plenty of heat maps and visitor recordings. Certainly, those that I've seen many, many, many times. people that buy do read. So taking the average of, the 97% that don't buy and the 3% that do, and then saying people don't read is a little silly, right? So yeah, I'm always a fan of shorter paragraphs, bullet points when you can. But more important than any of that is trying to write something compelling.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, many people, in my experience, feel like they have to condense their product description so that it fits in a certain window, or above the fold kind of thing, as I quote, air quotes, above the fold. In my experience too, people will scroll down. So if it's a longer page that provides value, that's more important than anything else, because people will read it and they want to understand what they're buying before they buy it. And it's in your best interest to help them understand it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And another good rule of thumb there is just ensure that what you're talking about, whether it be the benefits of the product, the way the product works, from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, goes from general to specific. So if you have very specific details of fitment and sizing and things, don't lead with that. If someone needs to know the details to that level, they will scroll. But again, general rule, top of the page to bottom of the page should go general to top, down to more specific at the bottom.
I love that example. Someone asked, how do you balance user-generated copy with SEO on a product page?
So I'm not entirely sure if the question is feeling that user-generated content might harm SEO, or maybe isn't as good as content generated by the internal team. But truth be told, if it's copy that's relevant to the product on the page and some of that copy helps me to sell more things, then I really don't care. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking too. I mean, ultimately, when someone types a search into Google, they're asking a question, and your job is to answer that question. And if the user generated content answers that question for you, then I don't know why that's a problem compared to if
Now,
you typed it yourself.
perhaps there's a concern about the user-generated content being from an app and like appearing in an iframe or something, readability concerns, all things like that. From a technical standpoint, again, that's much more based on how you display that user-generated content. But as far as like strictly an SEO problem, I don't see it.
Perfect. And then what do you suggest as best practices for using video on product pages?
A good question, because we didn't really talk about video. If your product lends itself to an explainer video, or or again, you've done video tutorials, then obviously weaving them into the image gallery is great. Maybe leading off with that, but then also I would put calls to action to that in other spots on the product page. For instance, near the add to cart underneath, if you want to put, see how it works. If there are video reviews that you have, I would again find little calls to action that you kind of weave in the page with those as well. So yeah, I highly recommend, if you've got video, feature it in the image gallery at the least, and then other spots as well.
Perfect. And we've still got lots of time, so if you have questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. I want to ask a question around the storytelling, because I feel like there hasn't been a ton of questions around that. And that tends to be where I see folks struggle the most. And I think that comes from, wanting to, as you said before, like sharing that technical side of things, the clarity around it, right? So how do you find that balance of being like quippy with your content and telling that story with something that's relatable but still being informative? Do you have any advice for them on that?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, because there tends to be these things that feel like a dichotomy of things that just don't go together, which is, I want to be interesting and, like you said, kind of quippy and have personality, and yet I've got to be clear. they're not necessarily, mutually exclusive. I think that what I always say about being clear is that if you have the choice of being clear versus being clever, err on the side of clear. And as that pertains to storytelling, again, I think that the best thing you can do is go and mine your own reviews, testimonials, um, for those stories that people are already telling, right? And then kind of weave those back in. Now, when it comes to, again, just writing out product copy on your page, you're trying to be, very clear about what the benefits are and have a personality. So the best way to do that, obviously, you can study other brands that do it really well. But again, it's more thinking of it in terms of how would you talk to a friend, and then making that right for the web. Versus people feel like when they write copy that they're on a stage to 10,000 people, and they need to sound buttoned up and sophisticated because there are 10,000 people on their website. But the big difference there is it's not 10,000 people in a crowd; it's one person in front of a computer. So it's all of these one-to-one sort of relationships, so to speak, versus a 1 to 10,000. So don't write your copy as if you're on a stage to 10,000. Write it again as if you're speaking to one person.
Yeah, and then I also love the way that you were trying to read out some of the description before. I've noticed when you say things in your head, it sounds so much easier than when you actually read it out loud. You're like, this is actually a tongue twister. I can't even see the words without pausing and trying to figure out where I'm saying.
I had read that in my head 100 times, like, you know what I mean? And like, I couldn't get through like half of a sentence, but it just, as it's coming out, I'm like, this is an absurd way to speak. Like nobody, and even, and again, I should have put at least another like example. And so we don't have to continually just pick on this bike company, but that isn't how a great salesperson would sell that bike in a physical bike store, right? Um, they wouldn't just start talking to somebody about the watts, and it just doesn't make sense. It's not how you have a conversation. Because again, at the end of the day, somebody doesn't want a 750 watt engine. They want an electric bike that goes fast enough that they can get to work, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point too of like you were reading it in a paragraph form as opposed to, as we talked about before, bullet pointing it out. It's like when it's bullet pointed, you're going to read it differently because it's specs than when it's a paragraph form and you're expecting some sort of logical sentence that's happening. Not that it was illogical, but you try to read it
Yeah,
differently.
yeah, and I think that's a good point too, because those specifications, if you're deep into researching electric bikes, those might be really important specifications. They just belong in a bullet point list further down the page, um, rather than obviously where they were. Because again, if we talk about our general to specific layout, let's put those specific features towards the end of the page versus the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think it's better to remove sold out variants from the product page or add a back in stock notification form?
Yeah, this is another great one. I've actually seen some really unique ways of doing this lately. So the worst thing you can do is just take the product off, right? We want to leave something there. The next best would be to have a page where you can at least sign up for an email to be notified when they're back in stock, because also there's something natural that happens uh, um, when you show something sold out that, hey, there is some demand for this product. Now, what I've noticed recently, and I believe it was a brand named CALLAWAY, CARAWAY, that does a very good job of this. They sell ceramic pots and pans, and they're very much in high demand. But instead of saying sold out or just having an email newsletter sign up, they just let you reserve one for their next shipment that comes in. Now, all they're really doing is making you pre-order it. But how much better is saying reserve yours, from our next shipment than pre-order? Um, it's just a language change, but it's much better. And I've actually gone to a client of mine that is in a similar situation and said, hey, why are we just collecting an email address here? Let's just let people buy this. So again, we flipped the page back on. I think we also stole/borrowed this idea from CARAWAY. We let people know every day, hey, 22% of the next shipment's already sold out. No bullshitting, no fake widgets that tell you Sammy and Sarasota just bought this. Just being truthful and saying, hey, our next shipment that's coming in is already 22% reserved. It's just a natural urgency play there. That's, again, it's truthful. It's not, so there are kind of, again, 3 ways you can go. 1 is just say sold out. Don't recommend that. 2, at least collect an email address. And 3 is not just letting someone pre-order, but letting them know, hey, the reason you're pre-ordering this is because they're in demand.
Yeah, I have a client that does something similar to that as well, where they, I think they actually collect the emails, but then they also post it out to those that are on their subscription list that says, hey, this is a new line that's coming in. It's already, X% sold out. If you want it, hurry up and get it, sort of thing, before it does sell out again. And I also want to clarify too, I'm assuming that the question is you're actually going to get the product back in stock. So if you're not going to get the product back in stock, does that change your answer, Josh?
Oh, like a product that's like permanently.
Yeah, like you don't plan to restock it.
Oh, yeah. So the thing there is I would actually still leave the product page up. Sold out is fine. And then I would just have like a call to action that says, hey, either we have a newer version of this product available over here, or like shop some of our similar products over there, like link them to something that's going to help them shop. But and again, this is not coming from an SEO expert by any means, but I imagine there's some link juice that's relevant to that page. But again, it sort of depends on the reason why it's sold out.
Yeah, and from an SEO perspective, just to add to that, if you do end up removing it completely, make sure that you set up your redirects so that it doesn't just go to a 404 page or anything like that. You want to either redirect it to a relative product or to a collection, or at least back to your homepage, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's why you talk to people that know what they're doing.
I don't pretend to know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm doing. I just pretend to know. No, that's not how it goes. So again, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat. We still have a few more minutes here. I wanted to ask a question around the tabs on a product page. I certainly have my opinions, but I'm curious what yours are with regards to either a tab or a accordion that kind of hides the long form of a product description, if you will.
Yeah, this is often a heated debate around this. So it's inevitable with a lot of pages that you're going to have sections of content that if everything is opened, it just makes the page much too long to scroll, specifically if we're talking about mobile. Now, particularly for me, I'm not a fan of tabs and their actual implementation because they tend to never, I'm thinking here, shrink down to mobile, like in a responsive way. That's all that appealing. For me, what I tend to gravitate towards, and again, every situation is a little bit different, but I tend to gravitate towards an accordion type of setup where each panel is at least opened a little bit with like a read more link. So at least if you've got a reviews tab, because I would hate to have reviews hidden inside of a tab. I'm sorry, when I say tab and accordion, I'm kind of using them ubiquitously right now, but an accordion that like hides specifications or hides reviews until you click on it. So again, like I said, I like to leave 100 and 120 pixels of it open so you can at least see what's behind there, see one review at least, and then click read more to fully expand it. That's kind of a best of both worlds that I've tended to find work pretty well.
That's really great insight. I'm actually usually opposed to tabs or accordions, if you will, because oftentimes when they're built, they hide it from the page itself, and so people can't see it. And if people can't see it, that usually means Google isn't going to be able to see it either.
Right.
But
right.
I love that kind of that little twist you put in there of like showing a little bit of information so that it's a little bit more obvious that there's more potentially behind that if you were to click on it. That's a great way of, I think, finding that happy medium, if you will.
Yeah, it's been, I'd be lying if I didn't say that was like iteration upon iteration of A/B tests, a lot of different things. But if you ask me, like, from the jump, I'd prefer that just let people scroll. Especially if you can keep, without getting crazy with sticky headers, but some sort of sticky header that at least allows you to go back to the top, add to cart, those things. But I understand that in some situations there really is a lot of content that would be overwhelming in the scroll. So at least try to mitigate any negative SEO impact or just negative UX impact.
Definitely. Do you have any specific advice for new brands with a website for building trust? Reviews are still sparse. Any other ideas? I'm an artist with a wide array of, I think, products such as prints, cards, table runners, tablecloths, etc.
Yeah. So the first thing would be, even though you don't have reviews or a lot of reviews now, set up the infrastructure for that, because it's how they talk about, like, the best day to plant something was last year, the next best day is today, or whatever, right? If you don't plant it, you're going to always regret it. So set up the infrastructure for reviews. Two would be, if anyone has purchased from you, do things that don't scale right now, and reach out to everyone personally, to ask for. You don't even have to ask for a review, just ask for their feedback. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this, and do your best to start as many possible conversations with those initial customers as possible, because one, you will definitely get some positive reviews from that. Two, you will get really good qualitative feedback on potential improvements or new product ideas, things like that. Those are like the main, the main two things. Would be, one, get that process in place so that as your traffic does boost up, you are getting those reviews. And two would be, start talking to anyone, at least that has purchased. I mean, it's as silly as this sounds. I mean, I would imagine some family have bought some things from you, right? Like, get those reviews. You don't need 10,000 reviews, right? Especially if on your product pages you're featuring them. So talk to whoever you have to get them.
And I think that you don't. So first of all, I love that advice of do things that don't scale right now, because we often feel like, oh, I can't call my customer and ask this question because that would just be weird. No, it's not weird. I promise. Send them an email and say, hey, if you don't want to call them, like, send them an email and say, hey, I would really love to learn more about how you liked the product or how you interacted with it or what struggles you had or whatever that is. But they want to share with you. I promise. Those people that care enough about the product that they're buying, they will share this information. This is how people do user testing all the time. It's not new. You're not reinventing the wheel, but do something that doesn't scale is just like, that is a really good tidbit, because I think that so many of us are like, oh, there's no possible way for me to get a hold of all of these 100 customers I have that haven't reviewed yet. Like, call 5, call 1. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
and going back to something we had said previously, which is be transparent.
Yeah.
Say, hey, you were one of the first customers. I'm so thankful for that. We're new, we're doing this, we're doing that, and then start that conversation. And then, frankly, for the larger businesses, get back to that. um,
Yeah.
it's astonishing how, as businesses grow, they lose such touch with their customers that things just, I mean, really, there tends to be such a disconnect. I'll give you an example. I was working with a brand, they're, a large brand. So the person I'm working with, has 30 employees under him, is very, very focused on the quote unquote big picture, and was even a little, we were doing an A/B testing engagement, but that also entails lots of qualitative research. That's how we get the great ideas. So initially, I think he kind of scoffed at the user testing of, oh, we're going to look at 5 people watch our site. Like, this doesn't feel like, like it's making a big effect. I remember presenting the user testing videos, presenting some of the main insights. And this is, I think, going to be the second time I curse on this, and I apologize, but he just looked at me and he went, holy shit. He said, I didn't realize just how difficult these things were for customers, or I didn't realize that was our brand perception. And so that company in specific is now committed to user testing. Every quarter they do X amount, and they make everyone watch them, from the CEO down to customer service, because it will astonish you, the things that people say, which is how they interpret your brand. You're on one side of it and they're on the other. So that's a big game of telephone there that tends to maybe lose some of the effectiveness. So again, continue to do things that you feel like don't scale if they entail you hearing directly from your customers.
Definitely. And then to go back to the first part of the question, which was around building trust on your site, what are other areas that you recommend, Josh, to help build that trust? It doesn't necessarily have to be reviews, but what are other trust factors, if you will?
Yeah. So this might get, sort of laughed at as I tend to not just bring up a list of best practices and say do those, because as someone who's A/B tested a lot, that a lot of them just don't do anything. But particularly depending on your user base and target market, simple things like trust icons really tend to work. And that's saying, if you do have the reviews, saying we have X amount of reviews on Trustpilot, where this sort of Google verified, those type, like whenever you can take a brand and a logo that everyone has heard of, Google, Facebook, whatever, and say this brand sort of approves of us. There's some like natural sharing of trust between the two brands that happens there. So as silly as it sounds to feature trust icons, again, I just ran an A/B test for a company. Their target market is between 40 and 60 older white males, and it was a 12% boost in conversions. Just adding a simple bar of trust, logos like Google, Trustpilot, et cetera.
Is there a fine line? I'm sort of a loaded question. Sorry. Is there a fine line between how many trust badges you might include, and where have you found that to be like this is too much? It's almost misleading.
Yeah. So the biggest thing would be try to stick to ones that are relevant and don't put you in a position where you feel like you're, um, not being truthful about the badge, right? Like just say, there's so many reviews we have. This is our, reviews on Google, like whatever else. It tends to be reviews, but the reviews paired with, you know, um, whether it's Google or Trustpilot, and also things like whether you have whatever your secure checkout processor, like things like that. It's not, you know, any more than 4 or 5 is probably overdoing it. And then I tend to just put them in the footer. Or again, if you've been featured in any like press articles, obviously a nice bar of press logos. Hey, we've been featured in Vogue magazine or whatever else. All those things as quote unquote overused as they're overused because they tend to work. Again, putting your brand next to a big brand's logo, there's some shared trust that rubs off there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually have a friend of mine who's was on Oprah's list of like, what was it like that her list of things that she loves or whatever for the
Favorite
holidays.
things,
Yeah, favorite
Oprah's
things.
favorite things. Yeah.
And like they were blasting it everywhere, and I'm like, you own that. Like blast that all over the place, because that's the kind of press that you want to be publishing and you want to be sharing, so that people who have not seen your products before, like, oh, well, they're on Oprah's favorite things, that must be pretty amazing, like I should do that too. And so I think, reaching out to, if you don't have that press, like reaching out to different areas of state to, especially if it's relevant, to see if they will feature your products. It feels kind of weird sometimes to reach out, but that's how most people get recognized, is that someone submits a name and that's how you get seen.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned with your friend, I give her a lot of credit, her or him a lot of credit, because so many brands, part of our CRO process is we go through and we mine for all these old reviews, old press articles. And I remember bringing to a client of mine, I said, so Jessica Alba was like sharing you on her Instagram incessantly for like a month about how much she thought your product was great. And I don't see that anywhere. Like, what's up with that? Oh, well, it's like a little shy about that, or it happened a long time ago. I'm like, stop, put it. Like, what are you do? What are you doing? Um, so you use those things until you can't use them anymore. I mean, it's again, there's just such trust that rubs off. There's such, you know, um, you know, it's just a great thing to do. And so many say, oh, I don't want to share that too much, or I don't want to ask for that review or ask for that testimonial. It's like, first of all, the worst someone can do is someone's PR agent says no. And if they say yes, then like, it can open up a lot of doors.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually have another client of mine who celebrated their 10,000th order. And I was like, congratulations, that's awesome. And you could tell she was like a little bit reserved about it, but it's a celebration. So if you have something worth celebrating about, reach out to your customers, share it with them, and then maybe they'll be able to help you with, building something else out of that, which then kind of encourages more purchases and encourages more trust badges and that sort of thing. So don't be afraid to celebrate those wins. And like you said, if Jessica Alba's mentioning you, share that stuff. Like that's
Yeah.
awesome. It's
It
a a what is a stamp of honor kind of thing. Like it's a big deal.
absolutely. I know we talked, in the presentation about not being boastful, but there's a very, very different thing between sharing others who have said great things about you and letting them do the talking versus saying like, we're the greatest, we're the best, we're the last frying pan you'll ever use. Like there's just, you know, for a lot of brands that have so much trouble sharing others' kind words about them, they then go on and speak in these terms of like, we hold ourselves to the highest standards. We have the highest quality of this. Nobody wants to hear that, you know? So it's tooting your own horn in the sense that when other people do it, like scream it to the hilt or whatever.
Yeah, and then keep in mind too that like what you do for others will be done to you. So if you start to boast other people and you tell, you give referrals and you send people their way, it all comes around in the end. So don't be afraid to give a pat on the back for a peer or a competitor even. I find that those will come back to you and they will help you in the long run. So just remember that, you're not alone in this, and that building that trust comes with your community first. So building that circle will help you to build more trust in general.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I
No,
was
go
just
ahead.
saying. I think that's a like great kind of way to start to wrap it up, in the
Yeah,
sense that the what you were talking about not being afraid to like grab onto others and pull them up a little bit too. That's also something that's really like unique. And again, like we talked about before, like a pattern interrupt. Most stores and brands don't do that. Not to mention, like, who doesn't want to do this with a little bit of help? And the more that I think some e-commerce brands could help by some partnerships and some sharing of successes.
definitely. Well, Josh, any other parting words? Or again, can you remind those who might be listening and can't see the screen where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone that has questions, I'm Josh Frank on Twitter, and also Josh at Test Triggers, two T's and two G's.com. So, again, feel free to ask me questions you come up with, or send me your store for a review or something like that. I've had a great time chatting on this stuff.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Josh. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.